We're going to get started now. My name is Keith Hefner. My name is Keith Hefner. I'm your Faculty Association President this year. We have a bunch of different reps here. This is John Champel, our past president, and Patrice is out front somewhere doing the paperwork stuff. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm just going to briefly introduce our two guests today. We have Steve Ramos. He's from the AEA. He's retired. And we have Daniela Smith, who's the coordinator of the AZ Retirement Security Coalition. Without further ado, Steve.
I think I'm going to be more comfortable just talking right here. I am Steve Ramos. I am an AEA retired member, and that means I retired from teaching. I was at Mesa High School for 32 years, and I've been retired since about 2006. And since then, I've had the job of monitoring the Arizona State retirement system for AEA and AEA retired. What that means basically is I go to all their meetings, I sit on some of their committees, and I try and make sure our organizations and our coalition is informed about what ASRS is doing, and kind of help give them the view of all of you as members of ASRS. And I will tell you how I got into that job. As soon as I retired, I sued the ASRS. And it was over a dispute on how they were calculating the pay. And I won that lawsuit, and it changed how they calculated the pay for everybody from me on forward. And I didn't have to do much because I had a good AEA lawyer. But when I got to AEA retired, they said, "Do we have a job for you?" And that's what I've been doing since 2006. So what I want you to recognize now is AEA is just part of something we call ARSC, kind of with a pirate's accent. ARSC is the Arizona Retirement Security Coalition. And you'll see we have some contact information up there that we'll leave up at the end so you can find out where to find us. We have a website, we have a Facebook page, we're on Twitter, we're all over the place trying to get some information out to all of our coalition members. Okay, so we'll start with what we brought you here for today. And that is, we want to protect our pension. And we know that private interest groups are focused on dismantling our retirement plan and basically turning it into a 401k defined contribution. Now, how can they do that? We supposedly have constitutional protections. Well, I'm going to try and explain that to you in a very short period of time. But let me tell you, I've been very concerned in just the last few days. Our opponents, who are trying to change our pension system, have been on KJZZ. They've had an article in the AZ Central Arizona Republic, and they have been all over Facebook with sponsored Facebook ads, and I assume they're popping up in other places too. So this is serious. They are really doing this last time, or this time. And we actually started working on this a year ago, right? Because we had heard the rumors. And we were all prepared to fight this battle during the last session. And it turned out they just simply were happy studying the issue last session. But this time, it's really going to happen unless we stop it. So just a real quick numbers review here. We have over a half a million members of ASRS. $40 billion, over $40 billion invested, and right now about 150,000 retirees. Now, the average yearly retirement benefit is around $20,000, and let me clarify that as a benefit, because ASRS covers a lot of different jobs. And that, I would say the main job is someone working in education. But we also have city employees, we have state employees, we have some county employees. And those are scattered all over the state. So there are a lot of other ASRS jobs that are not educator jobs, but could be educator support jobs. And so that's the average that we look at with all those retirees. Now, if you listen to our opposition, the most important number that you ever want to pay attention to is our funded status, and that is 72.3%. What that simply means is that if we had to pay all of the people we owe that are in the retirement system all of their money all at once, we'd only have 72.3% of the money we need to do that. 100% would mean we could actually give everybody every dime we owe them, okay? Here's the thing. We don't pay everybody every dime we owe them today or tomorrow or even in the next 30 years. And Paul Mattson, who's the director of ASRS, who's a wonderful director, and we're very happy and pleased to have him as our director, will tell you that funded status means very little, because sometimes we're at 100%, sometimes we're at 80%. There was one time we were at 120%. It fluctuates all the time, depending on a lot of different factors. And so right now we happen to be at 72.3, and I can actually, if you wanted to take the time, I could tell you why we're at 72.3 and not at 80%, which we were just a very few years ago, and why we're not at 100% back at the turn of the century. Okay, again, just an example of some of the different groups that are ASRS employees. You'll see the junior colleges represented there, but also the major universities and the cities, counties, and states, and actually some public safety groups. Here's the most important thing I want you to recognize, and this is taken from the state statutes of the Arizona law. And in statute, the purpose of the Arizona State Retirement System is to provide an incentive in the recruitment and retention of employees of the highest possible quality. That means the retirement plan was started for you to have a pension and for you to retire, but it also has this alternative purpose, and that's to attract the best people and keep them forever, okay? And for me, that turned out to be 32 years. For some of my friends, it's been more like 45 years and you may know some of those people that have done that. So to provide a retirement system that encourages employees to remain in service for periods of time that will provide the public, the taxpayers, to take advantage of all those people that we've trained and we've spent so much time investing in. We don't want them to take a job for 3 or 4 years and leave. And so the pension system helps guarantee that that happens. So if you don't know these two sets of definitions, this is real important to what we're going to be facing this year from the state retirement or state legislature. ASRS is a defined benefit plan, and that simply means that when you retire, you will be given a fixed amount of money, and for me, it goes right into my bank account every month for the rest of my life, no matter how long I live. Those checks just keep coming. Has ASRS in, let's see, I've been about 16 years out of the classroom now. Has ASRS used up all the money I put in? Yeah, They've given me all that back already. And now they're dipping into the interest that I earned and the interest that they earned. So that's a defined benefit, a fixed benefit for life. Now, a defined contribution is a 401k plan, sometimes also known as a 403b plan. There's several different letters in the alphabet that they use. But basically, your pension is determined by the amount you contributed, the market returns you get from that money, and here's the problem. There's no guarantee that that amount of money that you put in or take out of your 401k will last your lifetime. Typically, a person with a 401k, once they retire, will contact some other kind of financial agency and give them all of their 401k money, and then that company will sell them an annuity. Have you heard that term before? And that simply converts that 401k into a lifetime benefit. And basically, they're gambling that you won't live long enough to spend all that money. But that's the defined contribution. And for me, I'm glad I have the defined benefit. And this is just a statement I'm going to make and throw some numbers at you. And if you want me to explain some of these things a little later when we have time, I will. But a defined benefit versus a defined contribution, a DB plan can provide the same level of retirement income at almost half the cost of an individually directed defined contribution plan. And when people hear that number, it's like, really? You know, half the cost? And yes, it's the truth. And there's a number of things there that you can see, but basically we're pooling our money. You can imagine that ASRS gets a much better deal on their money when they loan it out if they have $40 billion than if you loan your $50,000. So we get good rates, we have good managers, they do it at a very low cost. And real simply, here's something that I never thought of before, but if you're thinking about investing in a 401k and you're a youngster, your financial advisor might say, well, we should put you in riskier stocks right now because they pay high returns. And maybe a little bit of bonds over here because they're not so risky and you want to have something that's a little less risky. But then, as you grow older and come closer to retirement, what happens to that mix? Well, if your financial advisor is treating you well, he or she will say, you know what, you should increase the safer investments and cut down on these risky investments because you're getting close to retirement, you're going to need that money. Well, ASRS never has to do that. We never have to play that game because we always have brand new people coming into the system and people ready for retirement. And so we can always invest our money right down the middle and not have to play those games. Okay, just a couple of examples, and there's many, many more, but we'll start with West Virginia and Michigan in the 90s. Both of them decided, let's switch to a 401k, a defined benefit plan, a defined contribution plan, and see what happens. And what happened in West Virginia was it was a disaster. Very quickly, they realized that people weren't saving enough money. They weren't going to have a safe, secure retirement. And West Virginia was smart enough to change back to a defined benefit pension and offered all those people that had changed out back in if they wanted back in. And the vast majority of them said, yes, please, put us back in a pension. We're simply not able to save enough money with a 401k. Michigan tried the same thing. They have not converted back. And they're looking at people who simply are not going to have enough money to retire. I have to just give you a quick story. As I was getting close to retirement, a couple of my friends were also getting close to retirement, Steve and Tom. And Steve and Tom were identical twins. One of them taught in the Gilbert Public Schools. The other one taught at ASU. Now, you may not know this, but ASU and the universities are the only group in ASRS that is allowed to offer someone, one of their employees, either a 401k or a 403b or a pension. You get to choose that. It's an irrevocable decision. But when you're hired, you get to pick. And Tom at ASU picked the 403b. Steve picked, well, he didn't have a choice. He was in Gilbert, and he ended up with the pension. They both tried to retire at the same time. Steve had no problem. He retired with an ASRS pension. Tom was with, and I can't remember the name of the 403b company, but he did not have enough money to retire. He ended up working another 5 years, just scrimping and saving every dime he could. And of course, what was happening at that time, the stock market was crashing. And pretty much he lost half of his money right at the time he wanted to retire. So a lot of stories out there, and we'll talk some more about that. This slide is intended to answer a specific claim that's being made out there. The claim is, and you've probably heard it if you've watched the news, that millennials don't stay in their jobs very long. That they just want to go from job to job to job to job, and they just don't stay anywhere. And so a pension doesn't make any sense to them. That's not true. And we were able to go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics to find out that millennials don't job hop any more than anybody else job hops, and especially in education. Public schools have some of the lowest employee mobility rates of any job group in the country. Now, here's the problem in Arizona. We're losing educators right now. They're not leaving because they hate their pension. There might be some other reason. And I can tell you the legislature, some people in the legislature and the people that are opposing us are going to tell you that what we need to do is to lower that contribution rate, which is pretty high right now. They want to lower that contribution rate a little bit and give you more pay. So here's the way I look at that. So you're gonna give me more money now and rob that money from my pension. And that's exactly what they're talking about doing. And we've watched them do it. Oh, let me talk about who the bad guys are. Who's behind these attacks? Well, we start with the Arnold Foundation. I just did some more research on John Arnold. John Arnold worked for Enron. You remember that, yeah. Enron was oil trading company, something like that. Anyway, John Arnold actually got out of Enron before it went broke. He got an $8 million bonus as he left. There is no evidence that John had anything to do with the company failing, okay? So we'll clear that up. But since he has retired from being a hedge fund manager, he now goes around the country. It actually is called the Laura and John Arnold Foundation, with Laura being his wife. And he goes around the country trying to convince cities, states, and counties to convert their defined benefit plans into defined contribution plans. The other group that's mentioned here is the Reason Foundation. The Reason Foundation is a think tank. I always wanted to work for a think tank. I thought, that's a job I could do. But these guys, if you put them on the political spectrum, you'd have to call them libertarians, okay? And that's where they're coming from. Anyway, they came to town and they actually have been working in our state converting all of the other pension plans. Now, we mentioned the Arizona Chamber of Commerce is because they have teamed up with the Arnold Foundation, the Reason Foundation. Americans for Prosperity are in on this. And the newest one, the people that are putting all this stuff out on Facebook is called Equable. Has anybody seen Equable pop up on their Facebook post? As far as Daniela and I can determine, Equable has existed since March of last year. So they don't have much of a background, but I think they're just the face of the opposition. So those are some of the people that we're up against. So is the threat to ASRS real? Well, let's go back just quickly to 2013. It started with the elected officials pension plan. They had a defined benefit pension plan. In fact, guess what? The elected officials had the best defined benefit plan of anybody in the state. Does that surprise you? They voted for it. They decided we're going to reform that plan since it's terribly underfunded. And when I say terribly, their liability, they were at a funded ratio of something like 32%. That's when you want to worry about funded liability, okay, unfunded liability. So they were in bad shape. They decided to take the drastic measure and close the plan. It's a very small plan, elected officials, compared to 500,000 people in ASRS. The EORP plan was very small. But even at that very small size, if you close the plan, and what I mean by close, you say, okay, everybody that's in the plan gets to stay in the plan and gets to have their defined benefit pension, okay? But starting tomorrow, and actually for the elected officials, starting after the next election, okay, they're already in, all right? But anybody who gets elected after 2013 will be in a 401k style defined contribution plan. Now, think about this. You've got all these people that are in the system and they're expecting to collect their money. They're already what I call in the pipeline. And all of a sudden, you turn off the tap. Nobody else is coming into that system anymore. That creates a huge liability. And the legislature actually put a number on that liability. $5 million a year for 30 years. That's how much the legislature had agreed to pay to close their own pension plan. Out of the general fund, the money that everybody's always fighting with, $5 million every year for 30 years goes to pay off that closed pension plan. Oh, except last year, they found out that they calculated the number wrong. It's actually going to be more like $8 million. So they had to pass a law to increase it from 5 to 8, and now it's $8 million for the next 30 years. So that's what happens when you close the plan. Now, public safety, and that's our firefighters and police, state police, and again, some city, some county, but again, it covers a variety of people. And it's called the Public Safety Retirement System, the PSPRS. So mostly we're talking about firefighters and police. So the Reason Foundation got together with the governor's office and the state legislature and decided to negotiate. And what they negotiated was a new plan. And the new plan would, and I asked the head of the firefighters, I said, did you get a good deal for your members? And he said, I got a great deal for our members. And he did, except for the members that come in after they pass the deal. Because all of his members that were members and working members right now, as they were working on the deal, are fully protected and get almost their full pension plan as it was designed. The thing that changed was anybody that came in after that ended up in a hybrid. And a hybrid is some sort of a mix between a defined benefit, defined contribution plan. So it gives you a little bit of pension and a little bit of 401k. And you can imagine it's a worse plan. And in fact, we're finding public safety employees all over the country now avoiding states like Utah and even in Arizona where you're not getting a full pension. You can go somewhere else and be a cop or a firefighter and get a pension. But if you go to Utah or one of the other states that has converted to a hybrid plan, then you're not going to be as well off. So that happened in 2016-17. And there was one little catch, and that was their cost of living adjustments, their COLA. They were getting automatic cost of living adjustments no matter what the cost of living actually was. They were getting built-in cost of living adjustments even when the cost of living dropped down to less than 2%. And that was just unsustainable. But remember, I told you we have constitutional protection for our pension. And so they literally had to go to the voters and say to the voters, will you change the Constitution so we can do some adjustments to the firefighters and public safety pension plan? And do you guys remember Prop 123? Remember the governor borrowing the land grant money and all that? Did you all vote on that? Do you remember 124? It was on the same ballot, right underneath 123. That was the constitutional change to the public safety firefighter pension. Passed just like that, and nobody even noticed it. The next year, they reformed the corrections officers plan. Now over 90% of corrections officers have defined contribution plan only. They also had to change the Constitution. That was Proposition 125 on the last election ballot. Probably you didn't notice that one either. And the reason I tell you this story is because people say, yeah, Steve, but we have constitutional protection. And I say, yes, that's a very good thing that we have constitutional protection. Or the legislature probably would have robbed our $40 billion a long time ago. But look how easy it is to put something on the ballot. And just like that, you can change that constitutional protection. So we have to be very careful. So who will pay for this 401k option if it actually happens, if they win? Well, first of all, I picked the picture of the two unhappiest retirees I could find there. Retirees like me who know that ASRS does not have a COLA. Did you know that? We do not have a cost of living adjustment. We have something called a PBI. Has anybody ever heard of that before? It's a convoluted way to say if ASRS makes a lot of money, more than they expect to make, then you need to kind of divide that up and give it to all the people that are retired. And there have been PBIs in the past, but I retired in 2006. There has not been a PBI since 2005. So there are some issues around cost of living that as ASRS members, we need to be concerned about. But don't let anybody tell you, we're going to help you with a COLA while they're robbing our system and turning it into a 401k. I have to tell you, I didn't pay a lot of attention to my pension while I was working. I don't think a lot of people do. But somebody was there looking out for that pension, and some of them were my colleagues who taught at Mesa High with me and passed those constitutional protections in the late 1990s. I have to hope that as retirees now, my colleagues are willing to stand up and say, you know, I don't care if this just affects directly new hires. because I understand that if you turn the tap off with those new hires, that's going to affect the contribution rate of current employees. And that's going to affect the possibility of getting a COLA in the future for retirees. And certainly, it's going to be devastating to our sons, our daughters, and our grandkids who enter the professions that we enjoy now. So that's the importance of knowing, what's the big deal? It doesn't affect me. Yeah, it does affect you. So, can governments still afford a pension plan? Of course they can. You can see the amount of economic activity that's mentioned in these slides here. I like to remind people that when the market crashed, I always say people, I was in ASRS. I was a retiree in 2008 when the market crashed for the second time. 2001 and 2, I think, was the first time. So when it crashed the second time, I asked people, what do you think happened to my pension check? Anybody know? I kept getting it because ASRS had promised me a pension for life in a certain amount. And guess what I did with that pension check? I spent it. So I like to say that myself and my fellow retirees helped bring Arizona out of the recession. And it's certainly true. We had money to spend. And while other people were cutting back and making adjustments, we were able to continue to receive our pensions and to spend that money at local businesses and support the Arizona and the United States economy. Finally, our goal here is to raise an army of informed ASRS members. So don't let the legislature trick public employees into making a bad choice. Protect the Arizona pension. Keep Arizona's public service employees in Arizona jobs. And the reason we use this word choice is because as we talked to the legislature last year, and we would say, have you heard anything about changing the ASRS pension system? What do you think? And a lot of them would say, well, we like choice, okay? And so we would say, well, yeah, but it's a bad choice. And so that's kind of been our theme. 401ks are a bad choice. Higher costs, higher risk, a higher risk of employee turnovers, and lower returns. All of those things are the problems with going with a 401k. And I hate to say that it'll be our new young people coming in that are, in the old days they handed you a stack of paperwork. I don't know whether they still do that today. It's probably on a disk drive, okay? But I wanted to get into my classroom and get my class ready. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the papers that I was signing. And if somebody came in today and said, do you want to be in a pension plan that where we take almost 12% out of your paycheck every time you get paid? Or would you want to be in a 401k and instead we'll take, and who knows what their number will be, because we still have a liability to pay off. But even if they said, we'll give you 6, as a new employee, what do you think those new employees are going to say without reading and understanding what they're doing? That's my fear. Okay, so just a reminder, ASRS is the premier public employee pension plan in Arizona and one of the top-rated plans in the nation. Defined benefits pension plans attract and keep employees in public service, and 401k plans risk leaving retirees short of benefits and dependent on public welfare. There's our coalition. I don't know if you can read all those, but it's a group of unions, public employee groups, and we even have more than on that list, right? Yeah. So we're all working with this together. We worked together back in the 90s to get the constitutional protections, and we're doing it again now. And there's our information. And are we open for questions yet, or do you want to go first? She's saying, do you want questions now for me, or do you want to see her talk about how we fight this thing? Okay, I don't blame her.
I just wanted to mention that if you saw that list that Steve showed at the end there, at the very bottom, you may have recognized the Maricopa Community Colleges Faculty Association.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Daniela Smith, and I am the coordinator for the Arizona Retirement Security Coalition. And I did want to talk to you a little bit about the Retirement Security Coalition. Yes. Oh, even louder. Okay. So the Arizona Retirement Security Coalition was active years ago when there were other threats, and then they were dormant for a while. And then we reconvened just in time in the summer of 2018. And we were fortunate enough to get a grant from the National Public Pension Coalition. And you saw the list of partners that have come together. So between funding from the National Pension, I'm sorry, I just blanked on their name, the National Public Pension Coalition, and with the support of all of our partners, including your faculty association, we have been able to get together to do this work. We actually meet every single Monday during the legislative session, and either Eddie is there or your lobbyist, Mike Bilecki, is there every single week working with us to talk about the potential threats, to talk about what we're hearing, to meet with legislators. And then I am not only the coordinator of the group, but I'm also a lobbyist. And when people hear the word lobbyist, they think it is the absolute worst thing that a person can be. I was recently at a dinner party and someone called me scum of the earth. Yes. But the truth of the matter is that every single group needs representation at the Capitol. And the Chamber of Commerce, Americans for Prosperity, the Reason Foundation, all of these groups have teams of lobbyists at the Capitol, and they are there year-round, and they are talking to legislators all the time. And so all of you need that kind of representation as well. They represent the business community, and what does the business community care about? They care about keeping money in their pockets, right? So they have a lot of concerns about the contribution rate. But what they don't have is all of you. And that's why we need you, because you are the voice, you're the one that is going to carry the message, and you're the ones that legislators want to hear from. They want to hear from their constituents. They want to hear from the people that are affected by these changes. And so that's why we are here, because we really need your support. So how real is this threat? Steve mentioned that last year, Americans for Prosperity was on KJZZ. The Chamber of Commerce, someone sent us a picture of a PowerPoint presentation that they were giving around the state talking about the pension Pac-Man, and this, you know, they were saying a 24% contribution, sure, because they were combining the 12% that the employee gives and the 12% that the employer puts in, right? And of course, teachers don't have enough to live on, because look at this outrageous contribution that they're paying. So not only were these groups around, but the Reason Foundation was around, and we were hearing a lot of information, and then all of a sudden the Equable Institute came in. Not equitable, by the way, because that might make more sense. It's called the Equable Institute. And Steve mentioned they've just been around since 2019, but when you dig further, who are these people? Well, they're former board members of the Reason Foundation, right? And so we didn't know if they were going to be sponsoring legislation last year, but we knew that they were having conversations with legislators. And so we started our education campaign, letting all of you know, letting the ASRS members know that this is happening. And we don't know when, but it's coming. In the meantime, what we did see last year was ASU. They currently, Steve mentioned, that they have a 401k type of program that they offer. So right now, when a new employee doesn't choose between the ASRS and the 401k type of product, they automatically default into the ASRS. Well, ASU wanted to change the default into their 401k type of program. So as soon as we heard about that, and again, I mentioned we meet every single week, and the Faculty Association is a huge part of that. They've been amazing partners, and we're very lucky to have them. So as soon as we heard that, we started meeting with legislators, we started meeting with the ASU lobbyist, we started talking to ASRS about it, and right away ASRS said, no, we would not be supportive of that. And so enough conversations were taking place that all of a sudden the bill sponsor that they were speaking to decided not to sponsor the legislation. So we know that this advocacy works, right? We just need to mobilize people so that as soon as the threat exists, we're on it, people are talking to legislators, and we can squash it immediately. I also did want to mention the Chamber of Commerce. So just a few days ago, the Chamber came out with a policy brief talking about how it is that educators are not really going to benefit from the 20 by 20 plan that was implemented, where the legislature increased education funding. They're trying to say that teachers are not really going to benefit from that because they have to pay such a high contribution rate into their retirement system. So those are the talking points that they're using. And the data that they are using is from a group called the Urban Institute. And some people are saying that the Urban Institute is actually a left-leaning organization. But I found out earlier today that the Equable Institute, which is tied to the Reason Foundation, commissioned the study from the Urban Institute. So as you dig further and further into all of these things, you see that it's really the same players over and over and over again. And it's the Arnold Foundation that has also funded a lot of projects that the Urban Institute is tied to. So we want to make sure that you have that information so that when you're hearing this misinformation, you can know exactly what it is that they're saying. And there have been not only Facebook ads, but a lot of op-eds in the paper recently supporting their positions. So this is the current makeup of the legislature. And this is another reason that we feel that if legislation is going to be introduced, it's probably going to be introduced this year, because we know that in November there's going to be an election, and this might change. So right now, in the House and in the Senate, Republicans have a majority, but it's very, very thin. It's a very thin margin. So this could change. And right now, the legislators that are in office are more agreeable to the Chamber and to Americans for Prosperity. And many of you may know that Americans for Prosperity is actually funded by the Koch brothers, or I should say brother, the remaining brother, right? So this is our current makeup of the legislature. Now, a lot of times people think about reaching out to their legislators, and that sounds very intimidating to them. For some reason, you know, a legislator sounds like he might be really knowledgeable and really important. And how many of you have had interaction with your legislators? Okay, so quite a few of you, but still many who haven't, right? So it might seem intimidating, but the truth of the matter is that legislators are not experts on all subject matters, right? Last year, almost 1,400 bills and resolutions were introduced, and there's no way that the cattle rancher or the real estate, the realtor or the farmer is going to know everything related to education or everything related to the ASRS, or there's just no way. So they rely a lot on staffers, and they rely a lot on lobbyists, right? And we all know that a lot of lobbyists from these groups are coming and giving them this misinformation. So the people that they have to hear from are their constituents. It's so important now more than ever for them to have a relationship with you, for them to hear from you, and for them to know how important your retirement is. While Steve and I have been doing this presentation, I've heard from many educators that have said to me, you know, I stayed in this profession so that I could retire and know that for the rest of my life, I'm going to have a check, and I'm going to know exactly how much is on that check, and it's going to be with me until the day I die. How many of you here feel that way? Okay. Yeah. So it's really important that your legislators know that your ASRS is really important to you. As I've mentioned right now, and what I also heard recently is not only are these groups talking to legislators, they're starting to talk to educators. They're starting to say to them, hey, can you imagine if you had only a 6% contribution? Wouldn't that make your life so much easier? Wouldn't it be so much better for you to be able to use that money for groceries or anything else that you need? And so they are talking to all of your colleagues, and so we need all of you to talk to your colleagues as well. So we need all of you to be a voice for public pensions and for you to lobby these issues. Here's what you can do. There is, So what's going around right now is a sign up for our Action Alert Network. Please put your information down if you would like to receive information from us. As soon as proposed legislation is introduced, we will immediately let you know about it, and we'll send you talking points, we'll send you all of the information that you need to be able to speak about whatever legislation is proposed and for you to have all of the facts. We're also going to have a lobby day. We're going to have our day at the Capitol. That's going to be February 5th. So if you sign up for our Action Alert Network, you will receive information on how to register for our day at the Capitol. Again, that's going to be February 5th. Write emails or letters to your legislators. How many of you know who your legislators are? Okay, so a lot of you. If you don't know who your legislators are, you can go to azledge.gov, azledge.gov, and you just enter in your information, and that'll pull up your 2 representatives in the House and your 1 senator. So please make sure to know who your legislators are and write them emails or letters. And you can do that now without any proposed legislation. You can email them and say, you know, I'm hearing a lot of rumors that there are groups that are going to try to change the current system that we have in place, and that really worries me. I don't want any changes to the current system, to the current retirement system. So you can do that right now because, like I said, those conversations are already happening without proposed legislation. You can make calls or visit your legislators. Now, if legislation is introduced and then there's going to be a bill number, you will know about that because if you sign up for the Action Alert Network, you'll immediately get that information. But even if you don't, I'm sure that Eddie will still share that information with you. So why is a phone call important? Well, actually, I think I'll get into that in a couple of slides, but write letters to the editors or op-eds and present this PowerPoint that Steve just presented to you. You can share that with all of your colleagues. That website, or I'm sorry, that PowerPoint presentation is on our website, and at the very last slide, you can take a picture of my contact information. Our website is on there. And again, our fact sheet and PowerPoint are housed there. Do remember to use your personal email account when you're communicating with legislators, and use your personal time. That's always important. So what went around a little earlier was our fact sheet. This is really, really helpful when communicating with legislators. All the information that you need is on this fact sheet. So you can take pieces of it and put it in your communications with them. You can meet with legislators and just make copies. Again, this is also on our website, so feel free to use it. When you write to your legislator or when you communicate with your legislator, always mention to them that you're a constituent. It's really the only thing they care about, right? Whether or not you have the power to vote them in and out of office. So be clear about your position on the issue. So if it's a particular bill, let them know right away that you would like them to vote no on whatever the bill number is. If you have a form letter from an organization, like if I send something out, just try to tweak it a little bit so that it's not as obvious. Always be respectful with them, even if they respond to you and it's something really outlandish, because I've heard really outlandish things before. Still be respectful. Always thank them for taking the time to read your email or to talk to you. And always include your contact information. A lot of times they won't call you, but they'll respond. And so it's important for them to have your information. Now, I mentioned that phone calls are really important. The reason for that is when there is a piece of legislation that is introduced and then it's going to get a hearing, the assistants a lot of times will tally how many people are calling. So it's not like you're going to call and immediately you're going to have to talk to your legislator and you're worried about your talking points. That really never happens. Most of the time, the assistant asks you why it is that you're calling. You can just say, I'm a constituent, I'm really concerned about this bill number. Please ask Senator or Representative so-and-so to vote no on this. And they keep a tally on it. And it matters because then when the legislator comes in, the assistant will say, you know what, you had 65 calls today from constituents asking you not to vote for this piece of legislation. So it really does matter. Scheduling a meeting. This may seem very intimidating too, but most meetings only last 10 to 15 minutes. They're very, very short. Just make sure that you mention that you're a constituent and that you'd like to schedule a little bit of time. And then when you meet with the legislator, please remember to be brief and to the point. Their time is very limited and they want to hear exactly why you're there right away, but share your personal story. All of you said that your pensions kept you in the profession or they keep you in your profession. So mention that to them. Tell them why it's important to you. And be very respectful. Again, I mean, I really have heard very outlandish things from legislators. And there was even a time that I testified against a legislator's bill. And it was a very controversial bill. And the media covered my testimony. It was played on the radio. The bill ended up dying, and this legislator saw me in the hallway, and right in the middle of the hallway, in front of everyone, started screaming their head off at me, and it was horribly embarrassing. And then 2 days later, that legislator called me and asked me to help them on another issue. So that kind of stuff happens all the time. So you don't want to burn bridges with them because you don't know where they can be an ally in the future. So always be respectful And if they ask you something and you don't have the answer, just be honest. You don't want to lose credibility. So just tell them that you're not sure and that you'll find out. And then please reach out to me and I'll help you get the information so that then you can follow up with that legislator. And then always thank them for their time. Op-eds. Now, I mentioned we have been seeing so many op-eds and so many stories about this pension crisis, and a lot of times, I don't think that I mentioned this before, but a lot of times the Urban Institute and the Equitable Institute, they are combining numbers from all of the retirement systems all together, and so their information isn't accurate, right? ASRS, like Steve mentioned, is one of the best systems in the country. It's 72.3% funded. So they're spreading a lot of misinformation and people are jumping on that bandwagon. And we know that there are other ways to fund public education, and stealing from educators' retirement is not the way. So we need people that are willing to also submit op-eds with opposing views, with real facts about what the situation is currently with our ASRS. So if you're willing to sign your name onto an op-ed, please reach out to me. Again, my contact information is on the final slide. Reach out to me and let me know. I can even draft it for you, and then we'll insert information particular to you. But it's really important that we get as many of these viewpoints in local papers as possible. And build a relationship with your legislator. I have seen many times that when a constituent starts building that relationship and they start going to events where their legislators are, and that legislator knows that you are an educator and that you really care about this issue, then when lobbyists come in and they hear opposing things, they'll start to reach out to you and they'll ask you, well, what is it that you think about this piece of legislation? So it's really important for you to start building those relationships and building that trust. And again, if there's ever a time that you don't have an answer, please reach out and I am more than happy to help you. So this is my contact information. Please take a picture of this slide and feel free to reach out. Sign up for our Action Alert Network that is going around, and we'll let you know about our day at the Capitol, which again is February 5th, and we'll let you know if any legislation is introduced this session. Thank you so much for your time.